Morning, everybody. Welcome to VizConnect. We're connecting you with the art of data visualization and storytelling. Today, we have an awesome speaker I'm excited to share with you, and that's Wendy Shijia Wang. Before we get into that, I'm just going to cover a couple small bases regarding VizConnect. So the first one is that we have a sessions library on YouTube. We nearly have 2,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel now. We have new content every single week. And sometimes we even have extra weeks when we have Tableau Public featured authors or other special events. We've been handling them the last several weeks. Cohorts, and every Friday we have something new and exciting for you, from Zen masters to people in our community that are data rock stars. We also have a community on LinkedIn where we have about 1.5 thousand members, which is growing at an alarming rate. There's a lot of good content there. You'll be able to see the blogs of VizConnect, as well as see different parts and videos that are shared with the community. So you have quick access there. So even if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, which you should totally subscribe to right away, you definitely should check out the community, as there's always content there. So now we're going to talk about Wendy. She's a friend of mine and also just an amazing community member that I love to see what she produces, because she's creative and has so many awesome things that she shares with the community, and such a supportive member. So her bio is that she's a user experience designer based in Shanghai, China. She has been using Tableau for 2 years for personal projects. She enjoys creating viz about topics that have interest to her. Besides data, Wendy likes traveling and watching documentaries. We have shared interests there. So I'm so excited for you to share your presentation now. So thank you so much, Wendy, for coming along and sharing your experience with us.
And now let me share my screen first. Okay, so is it good? Can you see my screen?
Yes, Wendy, go ahead. All good.
Okay. Move things around. Okay. All right. So hello, everyone. Welcome to my presentation today. I'm going to be talking about drawing polygons in Tableau. And I will start with a short introduction about myself and my work. Then I will give you a walkthrough of my vizing process of Escher's gallery. That is one of my latest vizes. About me, Adam has already introduced me, and I am a UX designer based in Shanghai, and I design websites, web apps, and other forms of user interfaces. And I am a freelancer, so I work for both big companies and small companies. And 2 years ago, I decided to learn Tableau because as a freelancer, I want to keep myself competitive and updated. And after I learned it for a couple of months, I discovered my passion for data visualization, because I feel it's a way to express myself. And besides that, I also enjoy engaging with the data fam on Twitter. So here is my Twitter handle. Please feel free to message me on Twitter. And since I don't have many chance to use Tableau for work, and most of my visits are my personal projects. So here's a disclaimer. What I'm going to show today are not made for business. All of them are my personal projects. What have I drawn in Tableau so far? I have created muscle maps using points and 3D building. It looks like 3D, but it's actually made up with polygons. And I've drawn roots on map, and the curves on map. Both are made using lines. And of course, the Escher's gallery, I use lots of polygons. For those who haven't seen this before, here's a quick introduction. MC Escher was a Dutch graphic artist famous for mathematically inspired art. And this colorful graph in the center consists of 455 units, each representing one piece of his artwork. And these units are ordered by year of publishing. And there are 6 different colors representing the different styles. And the unit with the white mark, mostly on the right-hand side, represents the most famous piece of artworks. And by hovering over a unit, a tooltip box pops up, showing more details about that piece of artwork, in a photo and some text. In the previous 5 examples of my works, I've drawn points, and I find that I draw them using a very similar process. And that process has 3 steps. One is get coordinates. And there are different ways to get coordinates depending on the format of the data. For example, if it's geospatial data, which means it's a map, the latitude and longitude are the natural coordinates that we can use. And if it's a SVG file, I usually use some tool to convert that SVG code to coordinates. And for Escher's gallery, I didn't use any other tools. I had some fun doing math. And today I'm going to focus on this approach. And the second step is create calculation fields. And from my experience, in order to draw in Tableau, we actually only need 2 essential calculation fields, which is X and Y. And the rest of them, I call them helpers, because they help me to build that X and Y step by step. And later I will show you more details about this. And the fun part, dragging and dropping those calculation fields into your worksheet. And more specifically, X into the columns and Y into the rows. And that's the 3 steps. Before I start drawing anything, there are a couple of things I need to prepare. They are the topic, data sets, and ideas. So about this one, Escher's gallery, I had the topic first. I was preparing for an Iron Quest challenge in August. And my initial idea was to tell a story about Escher's art. And as far as I know, he has styles like optical art or surrealism. These are the most famous ones. So I did some research online. And from one website, I found exactly what I was looking for. And these are the most famous pieces by Escher. The first one, for example, is optical art. The second one, drawing hands, are surrealism style. But when I scroll down the page, I notice here's a link. It says, view all 470 artworks. And wow, that's a lot. To me, that button looks like this. And so I click it. Then, after a couple of clicks, I saw a full list of Escher's works ordered by year of publishing. And on the screen, there are only about 100 pieces. And you can see here are lots of skulls, portraits, landscapes, and only a couple of the optical that I got. So I realized that I know very little about Escher, and he has many artworks in other styles. But what are these styles? And when did he start creating optical arts? So in order to answer these questions, I decided to make a viz about all of his artworks, not just the most famous ones. So I started to get the data. And luckily enough, from that website, I can find almost everything I need. Take this piece of artwork, for example. Here is an image that I can use and some basic information such as name, year, style, and genre. Okay, so the first thing I did was to downloading all the images and save them into the shapes folder under my Tableau repository. This is where you save your custom shapes. By the way, I often use custom shapes to display images in my dashboard. And the second I did was to scrape the text data from the website with help of some Python code into a Excel table. And besides the name, year, and style, I also added 2 columns. The first column is ID, to make sure each piece has a unique code, just in case some artworks might have the same name, which might cause problems later. On the other hand, with these IDs, I can sort the artworks in the same order as in the web page. And another column is the photo names on the right. And these photo names match the file names in the shapes folder. Why would I do that? Because I have more than 400 images and data, and I cannot do this manually. When these 2 names are matched, I can simply use the Assign Palette button so that image of the shape will be assigned to those data automatically, and I don't need to do this manually. And now my data is ready. For the ideas, I usually start with pen and paper and write down all the dimensions in the data set and their data types. By writing down these dimensions and data types, I can have an idea about what visual encoding I can use for each dimension. For example, the style here is categorical. So if I use color as a visual encoding, it should be one hue for one style. They should be discrete other than continuous. And also, I did some sketches on the right. So my initial plan was to make a timeline that shows all the artworks throughout Escher's life. And the images could be displayed in the dashboard, like what I've drawn here, or they could be in the tooltips. I haven't decided yet. And now I have the initial ideas. And after that, I open my Tableau, import the data set, and play with some graphs. So the purpose of testing data and idea at an early stage is to discover insights, trends, and sometimes outliers. And I have 2 graphs to show you. They are from my tests. They confirm that art has the is top in number, and in the later half of Escher's life, he focused mainly on optical art. However, he did some other styles in the earlier half of his life. Obviously, in the 1930s, he did more artworks in surrealism and expressionism. And for example, in the other graph, in 1931, he had published 40 pieces in expressionism, which I didn't know this before. And besides basic graphs, I also play with unusual charts. Since it's a personal project, I always want to have some fun and do something unusual. So here is an example. This chart is not as accurate as the previous two, but it seems very interesting and vibrant. And it also tells the story about the various styles of Escher's artworks. However, I feel the dots are clustered by decades, but they are not ordered by year. So it looks a bit random to me. And that feeling of random doesn't fit Escher's mathematical inspired style. And I need to find something more mathematical, more geometric, and at the same time, they need to be fun and doable in Tableau. So I went back to the website for some inspirations, and I found some examples of tessellations from the website. And these are 3 examples of tessellations. And so these tessellations are made up of repeating units, and each unit fits the other ones around it perfectly, which means there's no space between 2 units. And I like the shape of the units in all these 3. The fish and the birds are amazing, and this triangle is also beautiful. And I want to draw the fish or bird, but it sounds too challenging to me. The third one, on the other hand, the triangle and the hexagons seems to had go. More sketches on paper. I try 2 shapes. One cube, and the other one is the final design. So these are the shapes of the 2 units I chose, and both shapes are unions of 2 equilateral triangles side by side. And the shapes on the right has a piece removed from the top. So I chose these shapes on purpose because calculation about equilateral triangles are forward compared with other shapes. And another reason is that the angle at the bottom is 120 degrees. That's 1/3 of a circle. So I can simply rotate that unit to the other 2 directions with the help of some formulas. And I knew there are formulas out there which can help me with the calculation here. Okay, so I've got my topic, the data, and a lot of ideas. It's time to draw something. And my first task is to get the coordinates. It sounds very challenging at the beginning, so I made a plan. I break the task down to a couple of mini tasks. And my plan was to draw the first unit, which means I need to get the coordinates of the 6 vertices, and then rotate the first unit twice to form a group of 3. So, which means I need to figure out the rotation with some formulas. And the third is to move that group to some new locations, which means I need to figure out the coordinates of the center of each group. If I can get them done one by one, I would have my tessellations in the end. So let's start with the 6 vertices. And here I need to use a technique called data densification. It is a technique to create some artificial structures in the data. If you are not familiar with it, please do research. Please do search for it online. It's very useful, and there are many resources on this topic. Okay, and back to my 6 vertices, I create a Excel worksheet, and it has 455 rows and 7 columns. By the way, the data from the website has 470 rows, if you still remember. But after that, I removed some excerpts, and the number of artwork is actually 455. So it has 455 rows and 7 columns, and 1 column for work ID, and the rest 6 columns are for 6 vertices. And then I pivoted into a long form in Tableau, so that I now have a vertex dimension here. And I'm going to use this dimension in the dashboard later. I also imported the data set I collected from the website. And then since I have 2 data sets, I need to use the added relationship function in Tableau to link both data sets on the unique work ID. Here it is. And now each artwork has 6 vertices linking to it. And since the dataset is ready, I need to start digging into my maps. And for the sake of time today, I will cover the most essential parts, but not go too deeper into the details. If you would like to dig into the calculations, please download the latest version from my Tableau public page. I just updated this morning, and it's the latest version. Okay, so a quick introduction of the calculation process. I set the 6 vertices in the order as shown in the graph, from bottom and clockwise. And this order is important because I'm going to use this order to link the vertices later in Tableau. And I also set the vertex 1 to be 0, 0, just to make things easier when I calculate the coordinates of the other 5 vertices. And at the end of this step, I got the coordinates of all 6 vertices in first units. So that's the result. This is rotation. So I use vertex 1 as the center of the rotation, and rotating the first piece X. And in the end of this step, I got a group of 3. So as I've mentioned, I search online for formulas for rotation and refine them for my calculation. And at the end of this step, I got a couple of formulas to calculate all 3 units in the 3 directions. And then next is the translation. I need to move the group to new locations in order to form the tessellation. So for the first column, just move downward a certain distance. And then the second column, move down a little bit and to the right a little bit. And for the third column is not move down, just to the right. So on and so forth. So the task here is to find out the distance between centers of each group and add that distance to the formulas I got from previous calculations. And that's the 3 mini tasks. And I'm going to show you something complicated, but maybe a bit overwhelming at the moment. But I need to tell you that this is what I got. And eventually, at the end, but when I started from the beginning, I started from very simple formulas, and then they progress step by step. So the process of figuring out these formulas is not as difficult as it seems now. Just requires lots of patience. So that's okay for now. That's the coordinates part. And since I've got the calculations ready, I need to create the calculation fields in Tableau. And as I've mentioned, I actually need only two essential calculation fields, which is X and Y, and they are in the red box here. And the rest of them are the helpers. And because they help me to build up that X and Y step by step. And for these helpers, I prefer to create calculation fields for most of them instead of combining them into that X and Y, because keeping them as calculation fields, or in other words, variables, could remind me of my process in the future, especially when there is an error, which happens very often. But here's a question. For this vertex X and the vertex Y, there is a variable X and variable Y in it. And these two are actually the coordinates of the 6 vertices. Both of them have 6 values each. So how should I write 6 values into one calculation field? And my answer here is a case statement. Like, for example, here is the formula I just showed you, and here are the values. So I use a case when statement, so that I use the statement to assign each vertex a different value, depending on which vertex it is. For example, if it's vertex 1, then the value is y. That's a variable. And if it's 2, then the value is this one, so on and so forth. And that's for the y coordinates. And this same pattern also applies to the x coordinate. So at that moment, I have got my 2 essential calculation fields ready. Now let's have some fun parts. Drag and drop calculation fields into Tableau. This is the interface that we are familiar with. A couple of things are important when drawing in Tableau. The first is to drag X into columns and Y into rows. And both of them need to be continuous dimension. In other words, they should be green pixels. And then the type of the chart is polygon. But feel free to test other types. That would be very fun. Also, we need to drag the dimension for the dimension of the unique ID onto details. So onto this detail, to tell Tableau to separate these units, do not aggregate them. And the last bit is drag the vertex dimension. And still remember, it was created in the data densification step. And drag it onto paths. This dimension has the vertex number 1 to 6, and this tells Tableau to link the 6 vertices, and the order would be from 1 to 6 by default. And that's exactly the order I set earlier for the first unit from bottom and clockwise. And now it's time for some magic. And here is what I got from my first test. This is the one of the 2 shapes tested. And obviously, here's something wrong, but at least the first cube seems okay. And it gave me some clues that I need to check the formulas for translation. And later, it looks much better. Still has got some issues, but it's getting there. Finally, by keep tweaking the calculations for quite a while, I got it right. And now I know drawing this type of polygon works. And it's time to go further into my design and put the dashboard together. So the technical part is done, and it's time to tackle the design, which is layout, colors, and the details. So for design, for this, I had a clear idea about how it should look like. And since the graph in the center is complicated, I want to keep the layout simple. So what I did is play with the layout in Tableau by dragging all elements onto the dashboard as floating objects. Then drag them around, resize them, and layer them on top of each other to see how the layout works. And in other cases, either I'm not sure about the design or I need to prepare some images for the dashboard, I will use other tools such as Keynote or Figma or Illustrator. And the other part is colors. So for colors, there are two things are very essential. One is the topic, and the other one is nature of the data. So from my experience, it always works to pick colors related to the topic. So I collect some colorful artworks for reference. I will pick colors from these artworks. And the second is nature of data. As I've mentioned earlier, the style is categorical. So in the Tableau's terms, it is discrete. So, which means I need to pick one hue for one style. And I realized I have 8 styles, but 3 of them are 3 of the styles only has one piece of artwork each. So I decided to group them into other, which means I only need to pick 5 colors from my references, and will also add a gray color for that other group. And I adjust them a little bit to make this color palette. And this step could be done either in Tableau or in some other tools like Keynote or Figma, whichever tool you like best. Okay, so that's the layout and color, and I also added many details into my dashboard. So the first, let me show you a couple of them. The first is grouping by age. So my initial idea was to make a timeline. I like to group the artworks by time in order to clearly show the difference between different stages of life of Escher. And on the other hand, since the story here is about the person, I'd like to group the artwork by age of the person instead of by year or decade, because it's natural to say he did something in his 20s instead of in 1920s. At least I feel that. So in order to group by age, the first I divided the 33 years into 6 groups plus the 7th group for now. And those are artworks don't have data of year. And then look into the data set for the work ID of the first piece in each age group and move it to a new column. And to do this, involves another bunch of calculations. So I'm not going to go through it here. And if you are interested, please take a look at the file on Tableau Public. I have 2 folders of calculation fields in that file. One for this one, grouping by age, and the other one has no grouping. And next one is marking the famous pieces. I found the IDs of the famous pieces, and again I use actually the famous pieces are from my very beginning research those famous pieces on the website. So I find out the IDs and again use the data identification technique to create points 7 to 12 for those famous pieces. And I reduced the calculation for the first 6 vertices and scale them to about 1/3 in size. And I didn't define that. I just reused what I already have and played with the numbers spontaneously until the results turned out to be good. And the third one is adding a legend, and this one is pretty straightforward and simple. And I want to show what are the styles and the numbers of artwork in each style. So I make a simple bar chart and make it a filter. And in my other works, I also use other charts as legend to replace the default legend, because it can save the space on canvas, and 2, it can add some interactivity into this. Now, here is another example, another feature of activities, which is using tooltips. And I'll make use of the tooltips when there is too much information that I can't show all of them. I will show the nice to have part in the tooltips. So the image here in the tooltips is in another worksheet inserted into the tooltip. And I use custom shapes and I use custom shapes for images as I've planned earlier. Here is the last one. It's very subtle. It's a background pattern. I use a background pattern because in research, the tessellations, the units of the tessellations don't have any space in between. Since I group the units by age, there are some gaps between groups. For example, here and here. So I added a subtle background pattern to fill the gaps. I wish it. So, and that pattern is not an image. I reused the chart from my first test and the one without grouping. And that same data set, removed, color removed, no more calculation. And I was really happy with that. And that's almost all the thoughts and the decisions and the long story in the process of making Escher's gallery. And I'm pretty happy that both the static and the interactive version turned out pretty well. And when I looking at this work, I feel every decision were made on purpose, and everything is there have a reason, and that's good. And I feel very honored when I see it featured in the Viz Gallery at Tableau conferences earlier this year. Cool. So to wrap it up, the 3 steps of drawing Tableau: getting coordinates, creating calculation fields, and dragging and drop calculation fields into Tableau. These 3 steps are not limited to polygons. They also work for points and lines. And there must be something else that I haven't tried yet. And on this list, I spent around 20 hours. To be honest, this process went a lot more smooth than I expected. I think it's because when I'm lucky to quickly find both the topic and the data set. And two is my previous experience prepared me for this one. This is not the first time I draw in Tableau, and I've tried different tools and different approaches before this one. So if anyone asks me for thoughts or advices, I would say every time you make a new Viz, especially when it's your personal projects, try something new. Either it's a new type of graph or a new technique, or just making some changes to your old settings to see what would happen. Because those bits of experience and knowledge would be very useful in the future. Okay, so wish you good luck and have lots of fun in your next project. And that's all for today. Thanks for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask or message me on Twitter. Thank you.
Hi, Wendy. We do have a couple questions for you. I love that presentation. It's amazing to see what you went through in order to create that amazing piece of artwork that Escher would probably be proud of himself if you were able to see it. But first question is what math and calculation resources do you recommend for someone starting to build their data viz portfolio?
I think math calculation resource, I think it depends on what you are going to create. I always have the idea first and have the design first before I look for the math or calculation or any other resources. So for example, for this one, I got my inspiration from Escher's work. I decide a couple of shapes, and then I search online for resources. And if it turned out, if I didn't find anything, I will come back to tweak my design. So for this question, I think it's you choose your topic first, look for the data, then look for the data, and then have some ideas about your design, and then just search online for whatever keywords you want to search for. And if you find anything, just go forward. If you don't, and come back and refine your design. Okay.
Excellent. And also, I would like to point out for most of the bespoke or custom chart types, there are many blogs that focus and share the math with you. So if you have a specific chart type in mind, feel free to look up those blogs. Flurridge's Tableau Magic are two very good examples that would bring up a lot of the chart types that aren't part of the show me section of Tableau that would be difficult to make on your own, but a lot of times they have the math already made for you and simplified. So a lot of things that you could do with those blogs is create the chart types that you want and also have the ability to have some customization with it because the math is so flexible in many of them. Also, I guess I would like to point out that with Wendy's, this was a brand new chart type. So there weren't really many resources for you to look up in order for you to do this, except that you had the math in mind and you were looking up the math to fine tune it, correct?
Oh, yes, but add to your reply to the question, I actually look at Tableau Magic and Flurridge Twins. I just enjoying browsing their blogs to look for these amazing, unusual chart types, and I just look at them, and I don't always dig into the details, but at least I know what's out there. And when I do design and make my own calculation, make my own chart types, I remember something I've seen before. So I can go back to their blogs and search for those calculations. Usually, in most cases, I can find something very useful.
Awesome. My question for you is, what was your favorite part of creating this particular viz besides publishing it? Obviously, publishing it is the fun part, but while you're making the viz itself, because there are so many bits and pieces that you had to come up with and combine. So what was your favorite part, thinking back as far as building this viz?
Oh, my favorite part is when I decide to look for some special shapes, and I went back the websites for inspirations. So I start look for lots of tessellations and look at the details of them, and all of them are really interesting. So I fully recommend you search online. The website is called WikiArt, and search for Escher. And in the latter half of his life, he has lots of tessellations, and there are lots of details there. It's really fun. That's my favorite part.
The math wasn't?
Oh, that one. That's the second favorite part.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wendy. This was such a great presentation. It was so fun to hear your process for this particular viz. And this is just an evolution of your style since you began, since I saw you beginning. And it's just incredible to see how far you've come and what there is left to go. Who knows what's left? But this is just an awesome evolution of your style. And I very much appreciate seeing behind the viz with you here.
Thank you, Adam, for the kind words, and also thanks VizConnect for inviting me.
Excellent.